Welcome to the Pitch Your Pick podcast, the podcast where we dive deep into all the sports books, find our favorite plays, and pitch them to each other to find the best bets every single day. I'm Joe. This is Jer. How you doing again, my man?
I'm doing phenomenal. We had our first sweep on the podcast.
Oh, yeah.
Had a busy Sunday, but I made a little upgrade to the webcam, made a trip home, picked that up. Other than that, though, it was a busy day, but I'm doing well.
Yeah, I like it. It was a fun day of NBA games to watch, and this actually marks the first official week of the podcast going down. We have 7 days under our belt, which is pretty crazy. So we'll have
Big seven.
we'll have a little segment with that. So we're gonna switch off to our day performance for yesterday. It was a heater. We're 4-0. I mean, everything went perfectly to plan. We love it. We love it.
And it was a 4-0, and the 4-0 was complete by 5 o'clock at night. It was an easy day. No sweats at night.
We'd love to see it. And even in the personal plays, I think I finished 5-2 on the night. So just overall, it was a good day. It was a good day. I liked it. But here's the special segment that we have. We have the week's performance. So we have this week's performance. Obviously, we'll do this every single time we record at the end of it. But we have a pretty cool thing here. So the overall record, Jerry finished 8-6, and I was 8-7-1. Sneaked him out with 2 extra bets there. For our NBA record, Jay was crazy with a 4-1 play. So maybe the Sadiq Bey assist needs to be an every single day thing. Jesus. And I was
The books caught up to it. The books caught up. I went and looked at it this morning. I actually said, because told it was the bonus play yesterday, but we couldn't make it. It was minus 200 to over 2.5. They're screwing us.
Then for the NHL, it wasn't so hot. You know, I was a nice little 0-0, and you had a 4-5. And then for college basketball, I was 3-2-1, and you were a amazing 0-0. So overall, I would say it's a pretty good week. I'll take basically being slightly positive on the week.
And and if we want to add, so totally we were 17-13-1 up. If we bet $100 on every game, we were up $271. So up to 2.7 units. That's a pretty good week for your first week on the podcast. I don't think we could ask for much more. So.
Yeah, we love it. Showing a little bit of credibility for the two of us, I guess, right? Look at that. So he's taking a nice little sip of the Sprite out here, and we have a decent little slate of games. We have a pretty bad slate of games. I won't sugarcoat it. We have a pretty bad slate of games. So we're going to switch it really quickly over to ESPN, and we'll just look at this quick. If we look at the NBA, it's just kind of one of those nights where it's not really like it's horrible. It's just not really games that are exciting. You know, Pacers, Magic, who really cares? Timberwolves, Cavs, Bulls versus Heat, I think will be a nice Eastern Conference matchup. We'll see who can take that one out. The Spurs and the Grizzlies, we'll be talking about that one a little bit later. The Bucks and Hornets could be interesting considering the Bucks have kind of been playing like trash. And Kings Thunder, I'm not really interested in that one at all myself either. So overall, it's an okay slate of games, but I wouldn't call it anything crazy. And then in the NHL, you said this one's looking decent, just not one that you're looking interested in a betting's perspective.
Yeah, so there's only 3 games tonight. Now, I think there'll be like 3 good games to watch. You got the Vancouver Canucks playing the New Jersey Devils. Both those teams have been hot recently. The Devils are on a win streak on the road, I believe, and on a back-to-back. You also have Toronto and Washington, 2 of the best teams in the NHL going at it. And the final game of the night is Boston at LA. I think the note is, I mean, there's only 3 games, but it's pretty rare to find 3 games in the NHL where all money lines are under minus 130. So, like, it could be an interesting betting night. I just don't really have a good read on any of these games tonight and really haven't put enough time in to research these. So I think I'm going to stay in the NBA tonight.
And then for college basketball, I actually only have one game that I'm really eyeing, and that's this Baylor versus Texas game. I think this one's going to be pretty nice between 2 of the best teams in the country, number 10 and number 20. But the other ones are all 10-point favorites. I don't really see it to be anything crazy. Luckily, my Syracuse Orange are playing North Carolina tonight. Now, all hopes are gone for our season with our starting center being out, so that UNC minus 7.5 line is looking quite juicy. Can't lie. But overall, that's kind of just how I feel about the Monday night in bets. I'm a little I'm not too excited, but I have compiled 2 picks, and he has as well, that we are ready to pitch. And as always, he is going to be starting us off with his wonderful picks for the night.
Yeah, so my first pick, it's actually good. I think a lot of people, including you, would probably cringe at this one.
Okay.
But the first one is it's going to be DeMar DeRozan under 31.5 points.
Ooh.
So tonight the Bulls are on the road against the Miami Heat. The total of this game is set at 225.5. So the books aren't expecting a crazy high scoring game or a crazy fast paced game, I guess you could say. And neither am I really, to be honest. We're coming up on March, and this is about the time of the year where teams start thinking about sending messages for the playoffs. And tonight I think we're going to see a more slow-paced playoff-style basketball game between these two teams. And for the Miami Heat, between Jimmy Butler and Bam Adebayo, they're always going to be a good defensive team. And tonight, I think DeMar's going to see a lot of Jimmy Butler tonight. And so far this season, the Heat rank 5th in points allowed and 5th in opponent field goal percentage. If the Heat get beat, it's because their opponents are taking and making tough shots. So far this season, DeMar's been a monster at home, but it hasn't been quite the same as far as his prop total goes. He still averages 28 points a game on the road, but has only covered this 31.5 point total line and 40% of games on the road this season. Over his last 10 games, he's only covered this total 4 times. And in the one matchup he's played versus Miami this season, DeMar he was actually very efficient, shooting 11 of 19, I believe it was, and having 28 points. However, this total of 31.5 did go under in that game. This play is going to be much like my Luka Doncic under points, rebounds, assist play from a few nights ago. The Bulls rank 13th in pace. However, the Heat rank 29th in pace. I don't think the Bulls will be able to control the pace in this one. I think Bam is such a tempo setter. He deters teams from playing fast and trying to take a lot of shots in the paint. And when Miami can get set up in their half-court defense, they're pretty tough to beat. I think DeMar, he probably has a decent game in this one. He probably ends up somewhere in the mid to high 20s. I just don't think the pace is going to allow him to get to 31.5 points in this one. And I think this was demonstrated in the last game where we saw the Heat win 118-92. So I'm going to ride with a DeMar under here.
Yeah, I mean, I don't necessarily hate it. I think the thing that's been tough for me is I've been riding the DeMar over points, rebounds, and assists, which has always kind of been a clutch play for me. But DeMar's averaging 35 a game in February, which is why I don't think it's insane to say that eventually he's got to have a pullback game. I mean, he's had lowest is 28 points this entire, I guess, month. So it's going to be time, I guess, that DeMar has a more slow-paced game. Because if you look at most of the games that he's played this month, he really hasn't had a terrible game. So I don't hate the play. It's just odds-wise, DeMar this month has just been not the guy that you want to bet against.
Yeah, no, he definitely hasn't been the guy to try and jump in front of recently. And like even like over his last 10 games, he has covered in 8 of those 10 games.
Yeah.
He didn't cover in his last game. He had 31 points. But when I look at a lot of these last games, they're played against a ton of teams that play with a lot of pace. Like I look at Indiana, Philly, Phoenix, Charlotte, Minnesota, Oklahoma, San Antonio, Sacramento, and Atlanta. Like in the last 10, you get a lot of teams that give up a lot of points and give up a lot of shots. So I don't know. I think the Heat might just be able to hold it down just a little bit defensively. I just don't think. It's more so just a play on the time of the game. I don't think he's going to have enough time and shots to get there.
Yeah, I mean, there's also the possibility that Vucevic or Levine, also have a good game because the Heat decide to focus more on DeMar and say, let's let the other guys beat us. That's always a possibility too. Because both of those guys have the possibility of exploding for buckets, but you never.
Yeah. And over his last 10 games in 5 games, he's been averaging 25 shots a game. And in the matchup versus Miami, he only got 19. So with 6 less shots, if it ends up somewhere around 19 against Miami again, which I think it probably might, just considering who's playing defense and the pace of the game, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I don't
It's
hate
not
it.
my it's not my favorite play in the world, but I just think that like it's kind of like my thing with the 40 over 49.5. Once point totals get above 30, I
It's a
start to
little
look
iffy.
towards the under. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, again, I don't hate it. So I
It's
guess
more just probability.
yeah, I guess I'll take us away from the NBA just for a little bit. I'll be bringing it back a little bit for that game, and I want to bring it back to my wonderful college basketball, my favorite thing to watch. And we're going to that Baylor and Texas game, like I talked about. Now, when I actually went for this, I had Baylor at -1 over Texas. It's currently -1.5, but I have it at -1. I still think Baylor can take this game by 2, especially once you get into the nitty gritty of a lot of these things. So overall, I think it's going to be a fun game. So Baylor and woo, there goes my phone. Baylor and Texas are two of the best all-around teams in the country, but both really excel at defense. Baylor is one of just those teams this year, and they've actually been dealing with a lot of injuries, which for a normal team would be pretty tough. But for Baylor, it really hasn't mattered. Now they have Cryer and Jonathan Chachua, who are going to be out for this game, but Flagler and co have really just been able to step it up in their absence, which is always good to see. They've won their last 3 games, including a 10-point win over Kansas, who's currently number 5 in the country, which is awesome to see. Now, Baylor is currently 45th in the nation in scoring, and they're 29th in lowest opponents' points allowed per game, which is awesome. And they are especially good at making sure their opponents don't get a lot of 3-point attempts up, which is awesome to see. Now, the problem that I see for the Texas Longhorns, mainly in this game, is on the rebounding end. Texas is one of those teams who really let up boards. They're one of the worst defensive rebounding teams in the country. They currently sit at 236th, which is just not what you want to see. They only get a defensive rebounding on 26%, or 26% of the time they let the offense get a board, which is just not really what you want to see, especially when we look at Baylor, who gets an offensive rebound 34% of their possessions, which is crazy. They average 13 offensive rebounds a game, which is 16th in the country. So we have a bad defensive rebounding team and a great offensive rebounding team going against each other. That's usually not what you want to see. Now, already, Texas is a pretty bad 3-point shooting team. Most of their offense ends up happening inside the paint, and Baylor, being an already great 3-point shooting team, it basically means that Texas has to really beat this Baylor team by only scoring 2s, which is going to be really hard considering Baylor is one of the better 3-point shooting teams in the country. It's not looking great for Texas there. Also considering that Akinjo and co are really good at guarding the paint as well. So just this matchup in general doesn't look too great for Texas. Baylor, despite injuries, has been looking absolutely insane on the offensive end. Their defense hasn't flustered at all. They're top 12 in both offense and defensive adjusted efficiency, according to KenPom, which is just insane. And Texas is only up there in one of those stats. Their offense has been really up and down the entire season, and I just kind of like Baylor a little bit more in this matchup. If you look at Texas, they're 1-4 at the spread in their last 5 games, and they're 2-5 in their last 7 home games. So even when they go home, they're really not too great at covering that spread, compared to Baylor's 13-4-1 at the spread in their last 18 games, following a win, which they currently are. And in total, over the last 3 seasons, Baylor's actually 49-24-2 at the spread on the road, which is a crazy record for a team to have on the road covering the spread. So personally, I just think that Baylor can edge this out. It's only -1.5, which basically means that Baylor has to win by 2. And all around, it's looking good for Baylor.
Yeah. As you guys saw in the recap, I don't bet this sport. I don't bet college basketball. I'm Canadian, so I don't get to watch much of it. I don't get to follow much of it. But I just looking at the preview of this game here on covers.com, and I'm looking at the team comparison and points to field goal percentage and such like that. These two teams don't even look comparable, and I don't even understand how this game's a 1-point spread.
It's because Texas is so good defensively that they are assuming that a thinned out Baylor team could lose to it.
Oh yeah, I guess with injury, but even Baylor's good defensively as well.
They're
really
top
good
12 in both offense and defensive efficiency, which is
and
a crazy
if Baylor's if you said Baylor's good at covering the paint,
Yeah, they can still get inside the paint, hold people down. It's just been a little bit more iffy without Chamo Chachua. But I mean, they're still
Because
a pretty
they're a
damn
really good
solid team.
3-point defense too. They rank 23rd in the country.
I mean,
I
yeah.
I like that bet.
I also love it because Baylor runs a very unique kind of style of offense where they basically don't run too many super tall guys. It's a lot of guards and forwards, so it's a lot of small ball and essentially
Mhm.
allows them to switch everything. And that's all they do. Everybody switches. So there's really not a lot of weakness to pick and roll coverages and things like that. They really can just guard anybody any given night because everybody's used to, having those undersized matchups, which I love. And I just think it's great team to watch if you just want to watch a great defensive game.
Well, I don't know nothing about the players, but if they're missing key guys, and this number is correct at 1 the way it is, the only thing I really see screwing you in a close game here is Baylor's free 3-point or free throw percentage.
Yeah.
They're 241st in the country, but like the way I don't know much, but the way I look at this game's not coming down to free throws.
Yeah, probably not. So anyway, let's have you bring it back to the NBA with your next spicy pick.
All right, so this is another one that, much like the DeMar DeRozan one, I'm not necessarily in love with it. It's not necessarily a play I'd normally make, but I kind of like it in this spot, just based more so on the teams that are playing each other again. It's more of a matchup based play rather than a data based play.
Okay.
The Timberwolves are on the road tonight against the Cleveland Cavaliers. I'm gonna look at Lauri Markkanen over 2.5 3-pointers.
Okay.
So the Timberwolves have not been a great defensive team this year. They're ranked 17th in defensive rating. They allow the 8th most points and allow their opponents to shoot 36% from 3. I think a big piece of this play is going to be Darius Garland playing for the Cavs. If he somehow gets ruled out like he did for one of your bets, or when he just doesn't decide to play, I will probably punt out of this bet and just bet the under on the other side of this. Because I think Garland will be able to shrink the floor, and it'll make for some easy kick out threes to Markkanen. And I think that's going to be the key to this game. Markkanen's been shooting well recently. He's covered in 6 of his last 10 games. And in 4 of those last 10 games, he has 4+ 3-pointers. So he's made one more 3 than he even needed to cover the line. In one matchup versus the Timberwolves this season, Markkanen hit 4 3-pointers on 5 attempts. The guy did not miss that night, and I think that's indicative of what I just said. He was getting wide open shots from open look threes. And if you leave this guy, he's going to knock him down. It's just as simple as that. On the season, Markkanen's averaging 6+ 3-point attempts per game, but over the last 5 games, that's crept up to 7.6 attempts per game. I like Markkanen to hit at least 3 threes tonight, and I'm going to take the over.
Yeah, that's not bad. I mean, we've seen a few instances where the Timberwolves have kind of just given up every now and then and give up some open shots to a lot of people. I mean, in the last game, they let Harden and Embiid just absolutely cook them. So I think consistency with their defense is a little bit tough. So, I mean, I definitely could see it. Now, Markkanen's not a guy that I would love to place bets on just because, Markkanen, a little bit of a spotty guy. But, I mean, I can't disagree with your reasonings on here. But I do think, with Garland in the game, this looks pretty solid for him to get a few more 3-point opportunities than maybe he would without. Or you could look at it without Garland. Maybe they just give it to Markkanen and say, hey, chuck that. You never know.
Yeah, I like it with Markkanen just simply because or with Garland, just that guy's gonna draw so much attention for like what might not be true, but what I kind of believe to be a pretty weak Cleveland offense. I don't like, and that's comparatively to like going into against playoff teams and whatever.
Yeah.
But I just think like he's covered this line in 4 of his last 5 games. He had 4 threes against Brooklyn, 5 against Chicago, 3 against Oklahoma, 2 against Detroit, and 6 against Washington. So he's been shooting the ball well recently. He's been shooting it over 50% clip in his last 5 games. just think he's just kind of on a nice little quiet run here. I don't think it'll last very long because this guy's pretty inconsistent, but I think I'm going to ride it while I can.
Yeah, I think another thing that could go well for you is Jarrett Allen. Them being pretty weak defensively also goes down to the paint. Cat cares a little bit more on offense than he does on defense. And I think if Jarrett Allen can really get it cooking, some offensive rebounds where maybe D'Lo's, leaking out and then kicking that out to Markkanen, who's kind of just sitting there waiting, could also work pretty well in your favor as well.
Yeah, I kind of looked also at the Jarrett Allen to go under or over on his prop. I just really couldn't.
Yeah, I looked at that one too.
Get a read. Couldn't get a read on the number. Like I think he'll be right around what his number's at. I think he probably has a good game against Cat.
I think it's gonna be a tough one. So I guess I'll finish off the day with a nice little NBA bet. And I think I said earlier. I'm pretty sure I said what game I'm going to earlier. It's gonna be the Spurs versus the Grizzlies, and I have a bad habit of picking the star player for my props, and I'm gonna keep it going because it's fun. We're going with Ja Morant out here. Now, Ja has just been hooping. I think a slept-on MVP candidate, for being honest. Really should be up there in the conversation because this guy has been carrying the Memphis Grizzlies, averaging 27 points, 5 rebounds, or 6 rebounds essentially, and 8 or 7 assists. I can't apparently read the numbers today. So Ja Morant has been absolutely hooping, and his current points, rebounds, and assists over one of my favorites to bet on is at 42.5, which seems like a pretty steep thing for a Ja Morant. But if we look at his last game against Chicago, he had 46 points, which literally covers the over by itself. Pretty good. Ja Morant just has that ability. Now, I think at first glance, the Grizzlies versus the Spurs looks like a bad matchup to bet an over on somebody, especially with Ja Morant's caliber, like a guard when you're going against DeJounte Murray. But if you actually look at the previous 2 matchups between these teams, it was crazy good for Ja Morant. Like, this guy actually kind of cooked him up. This game against San Antonio, he had 41 points, 8 assists, and 5 rebounds. And then the other game against San Antonio, he had 30 points, 8 assists, and 6 rebounds, which are both over our total. This one was 44, and I think the other one was near 60, which is
54.
Crazy for Ja Morant, especially against the team of the Spurs. Now, if we're looking just at the 10-game span of Ja Morant, he's averaging 28 points, 7 assists, and 6 rebounds. But if we shorten that to his last 5 games, he's averaging 33 points, 6.2 rebounds, and 6 assists, which is kind of crazy. And during that same 10-game span, Memphis is 8-2 at the spread at home. So it's actually looking pretty good. Now, the Spurs are the 9th best guard defense, but they're only 19th in team depth defense, which is looking pretty good. They're actually a pretty good road team. They're 6-3-1 at the spread in the last 10 games, and they're actually 18, 13-1 at the spread on the road, which is actually the 7th best in the NBA. So it could be a little bit iffy, but I think the thing that looks great for Ja Morant and why I actually really like this is the Spurs allow the 3rd most points in the paint to opponents, and Ja Morant has the 3rd most drives per game in the NBA, with the most drive attempts and the most drive, accomplished with the drive makes, which is pretty damn good. So on top of the Spurs not really being this crazy good defensive team in the paint, Ja Morant is crazy good at getting to the paint, and once he gets there, actually making it work. On top of that, Ja Morant draws a lot of fouls, so he can get to the free throw line pretty consistently. But luckily for San Antonio, they're only 2nd in fouls per game. But I think the main thing and why Ja Morant has cooked the Spurs previously is just because they're really not that great at defending the paint, which is probably because, Jakob Poeltl is down there. He's a good all-around center, but he's not really that great of a rim protector. So Ja Morant can really get in there and just absolutely cook them. Now, the Grizzlies have had a pretty tough last few games. They've lost 3 out of the last 5, but Ja Morant has played pretty damn decent in most of them, aside from his 20 points against Minnesota. But they did bounce back with his 46 points against Chicago. And in general, Memphis is currently fighting to get back to that number 2 seed in the Western Conference. They were there for a little while, but then knocked down. Now they're behind Golden State. So I do think there's a lot to work for here because obviously the higher you can get as a seed for the playoffs, the better it's looking for you. So I think all around, this may be iffy at first glance because it is the Spurs and they're always pretty damn good defensively. But I think that lack of rim protection is really what makes this bet pretty interesting for me.
Yeah, I don't mind the bet. I think I said yesterday, I'm not the biggest fan of betting on stars and these things, but Like Ja has the potential to cover this line in points pretty much every night.
Yeah.
So it's another one like 42.5, like is like the opposite of my 49.5, 42.5. I wouldn't really bet an under on a guy like Moran or Luka or those guys.
Yeah.
But I actually only have 1 point to dispute with your pick.
Yeah.
And I actually want to make your pitch better.
Okay.
Because I think you actually shortchanged your pitch by saying that this isn't a good matchup to bet an over on.
Okay.
This out of the 7 games tonight, this is the second highest total on the board. So the Bucks and the Charlotte totals at 241.5. And that's because both of those teams give up piles of threes. But this Memphis and San Antonio game is actually at 234.5. So they're expecting a pretty high scoring game. And then I was just looking at the pace numbers for both of these teams. San Antonio ranks 5th in pace and Memphis ranks 6th in pace. So just by
I don't know how I
pure
forgot
possessions, these guys are just gonna be running up and down the floor.
I forgot what we were talking about a few games ago. I was talking about somebody else's over where they were going against the Grizzlies, and the Grizzlies actually rank higher with Ja. I think they've moved up to 4th in pace when they actually have Ja Morant on the court versus not. So I honestly don't even know how I forgot to get the pace today. Apparently I'm slacking off. But yeah, it does look better, knowing the fact that not only are they playing pretty weak inside, but you're also going to be playing a really fast-paced game, which obviously is going to suit Ja 10 times better.
Yeah, and San Antonio ranks 27th in the NBA in points allowed, 112.7 points per game, 25th in opponent field goal percentage, 22nd in opponent three-point percentage, and 25th in defensive rebounds a game. And Memphis is the best offensive rebounding team per game, so Memphis is going to have some extra possessions here too. I don't think this San Antonio team is your traditional pop Spurs team that plays good defense. I think they're just trying to outrun people, to be honest with you, and that might be why their defensive numbers are bad.
That's fair.
But I think that's what Pop has in mind with this kind of under-talented team. They're just going to try and outrun people.
I mean, that's fair. I mean, all around, I like it, but I could see a world where it doesn't work out. Because you never know. I mean, Memphis could run them out the gym, and you got a 15-point win in Ja sets. I mean,
yeah,
it's just as possible.
I mean, like as you already said, this total's gone over twice this year. Looking at it last year, it went one. I mean, Ja was only a rookie last year, or second year guy.
I think it was a second-year guy.
He went way over in his first game. The other 3 matchups, he went under, but I think the Spurs were even a different team last year, so I don't even think looking at that makes much sense.
Yeah, that's fair. So that'll be our wrap-ups. I guess we'll get that daily picks screen all ready for you guys so you can see what we bet on these wonderful lines. I'm gonna have a good time. So we'll be back there in a quick little second. All right, so we have today's picks here. Baylor at -1 versus Texas at -110. Demar under 31.5 points at a -106. Markkanen over 2.5 threes at a +122. And Jared has actually something to say about that.
Yeah, and so before we recorded the podcast, I hadn't actually looked at the odds on that play, and I never realized that I was getting plus money on that, let alone 25 cents on it. So I actually love that play a lot more on the plus value.
All right, and then our last play is going to be Ja Morant over 42.5. It should say points, rebounds, and assists there, but I think we can all assume at -111. So I'll make sure that's updated whenever we tweet it out. Check out our Twitter and all the socials, by the way. So thank you for watching this episode of the Pitch Your Pick podcast, or listening to this episode of the Pitch Your Pick podcast. If you are on YouTube, hit that like button, comment what you guys think, and hit that subscribe button as well if you guys are new to the channel. If you're watching any of the podcast platforms, make sure you guys go ahead and leave us a wonderful review. Give us those nice 5 stars to keep the motivation going to continue this every single day. And also check out the TikToks and all those other things down there below. We hope you guys have a great rest of your day. Go make some bets and make some money.
See ya.